Okay, well, let's meet our next explorer, our next scientist. So I'm really excited to have Archana Anand joining us. She is an engineer, a marine biologist, and a National Geographic Explorer. She primarily works at the interface between environmental engineering and coastal marine microbiology. Her work in 2019 was supported by the National Geographic Society, mapping coastal biodiversity in scientifically understudied Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Today, she researches microbes in wastewater while developing and applying bioinformatics techniques to understand the mixed microbial communities involved in nutrient removal and cycling. So let's bring her in live with us right now. Here we go. All right. Good evening. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. It's so good to see you. We're excited, of course, to dive a little bit into your world, to get to know you a little bit better. And then again, I'll encourage our viewers who are tuning in right now. We have viewers tuning in from the US and Canada, of course. We've also had people saying hi from Brazil and Indonesia, France and the UK, Mexico. So we've got a great audience tuning in with us right now. I'm going to let you take over for a little bit, and then we'll come back for some Q&A action.
Thank you, Joe. Can you see my screen, Joe?
You're good to go. Looks good.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, hi everyone. Welcome to A Drop of Wastewater, an ocean of information. Before I begin, I want to thank the event organizer, fellow explorer and friend, Joe, for inviting me and thinking of me. Can anyone recognize where this picture was taken? This is Marina Beach. It's very close to my childhood home. I was born and raised in Madras in India. I come from a family of teachers, and naturally, the passion for education was instilled in me from a very young age. I spent most of my adult life in Singapore and Hong Kong, and I've been in the San Francisco Bay Area for about 2 years now. This is what I'd like to share with you today. First, I want to take you through my science journey from engineer to biologist. And next, I want to talk about some valuable years of the pandemic that I spent listening to stories from wastewater. So here I am. I'm a mechanical engineer by training. I graduated in 2007 from the National University of Singapore. And I worked for a few years, but I wasn't particularly satisfied with what I was doing. So I traveled widely over the next few years with my fiance at the time. And after a few visits to Africa and the Himalayas, I wanted to learn more about the environment and use my education to conserve it. So I did the first thing that I thought might bring me closer to my goal. I enrolled in a master's in environmental science at the University of Hong Kong. There, I met Professor David Baker, that's David on the floor, and was intrigued by the work the Baker Lab was doing, looking at human impacts on coral reefs. So we had a meeting, and I asked if I can do a project for my dissertation. David, who ended up becoming my PhD advisor, was skeptical because I was an engineer, he was a marine biologist. So we decided that a good starting point and middle ground would be chemistry. I was thrilled. The catch, I had to work on wastewater. The lab had been successful in getting funding to look at nitrogen in the ocean, and they needed someone with quantitative skills and a blended interest in marine biology. And so it began. Now, let me give you some context on why all this matters. The United Nations Environment Program estimates that over 8 million tons of marine litter reaches the global oceans every year. Just 10 rivers carry all this global marine litter into the oceans. 8 of these rivers are in Asia. Everyone is talking about plastic. We've banned the use of plastic straws. This is great. But why aren't we talking about sewage? Do you know where your sewage goes? Sewage is rich in nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus. Although nutrients are important, when in excess, they accelerate the growth of some microbes that respire rapidly and deplete oxygen concentrations. Now, this results in an ocean that is out of breath and has detrimental cascading effects on life and health of the ocean. Hong Kong is no exception to this. The city has a population density of over 7,000 people per square kilometer of land. Compare this with, say, Iceland, which has a population density of only 3 people per square kilometer of land. In fact, Hong Kong dumps over 1,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools equivalent of treated sewage into the ocean every day. Consequently, the impact of urbanization on the ocean is stark. But why does this interest me? This is because, despite several environmental stresses, the marine environment in Hong Kong is rich in life. In fact, Hong Kong has many more hard corals than you can find in the Caribbean. So, what kept me up at night? How does nitrogen pollution affect the ocean? And I decided to look at 2 aspects: life and health of the ocean. And this was when I got this incredible opportunity to lead a large collaborative effort with research teams from the University of Hong Kong and the Smithsonian Institution as part of the Global Marine Earth Observatories program. But for this to go on, I needed to do something and learn an important skill: scuba diving. It was hard work, but I got certified in open water, advanced open water, rescue diving, and scientific diving. And to date, these have been some of my best lived experiences. Did you know that over 60% of life in the ocean is either unknown, unnamed, or invisible to the naked eye? So, to study these tiny critters, I used these little mini hotels, ocean hotels, arms, as you see on the slide in front of you. These ocean hotels are made of plastic. They're about 9 inches in height, and they have gaps between the plates for water to flow through freely. I deployed these structures on the ocean floor using scuba diving for about 1 to 2 years, after which I collected and identified everything that colonized the plates using photography and their DNA signatures. Now, this is a video of me with my dive buddy Mike here, and we are retrieving one ocean arms unit in Hawaii. So as you see here, we've placed a bucket on the arms and we've secured it with bungee cords. The idea is for us to look at not just what's on the plate, but also what is in the immediate surrounding environment. The fun thing about this project has been the team effort. We've had so many people being involved: undergraduate students, postgraduate students, researchers from all over the world, high school and middle school students, as well as the general public. So here I want to show you another video of us in Hong Kong retrieving and analyzing one arms in the northeast of Hong Kong in a huge scientific, in a huge citizen science effort to build a genetic library of the ocean. The arms is in this box that you see here, a big bin on the boat. Sam, what are you doing?
We're quantifying global patterns of biodiversity in a standardized way using these plates that are deployed all over the world.
So this is a plate that's part of a mini ocean hotel. We put this in the water a year ago, and it has little spaces between different plates where animals can crawl and hide in.
Very similar coloration, but it didn't have the
This is one of my most favorite slides, and it shows some of the critters that we found on the arms in Hong Kong. I have an interest in pathogens, which essentially refers to a virus or a bacterium or any microbe that can cause disease. And what was interesting was that we found more pathogens in the sites that had more nitrogen pollution. Now, at the same time that this interesting finding came up was also when I had my first baby. This is Advik. He's 5 years old now and absolutely loves the water. Now that I knew something about life in the ocean, let's think about why the health of the ocean is important. Say we jump into the ocean and we see no sharks or no big fish for that matter. Is this a sign of a healthy ocean? This might be an indicator that there aren't enough predators to keep the herbivores in check, which will either directly or indirectly affect several other levels in the food web. So, long story short, I decided to look at predation in Hong Kong using a simple tool called the squid paw. This refers to a piece of dried squid that you see in white, deployed at the end of a metal rod, and it serves as bait for fish. I put in 25 of these and left them in the ocean for 1 hour, after which I came back to look at whether or not the fish consumed the bait. And the degree to which the squid pops were consumed was used to indicate the level of predation in that site. Another thing that I did was use tea bags. This is me with my dive buddy Taehoon. And what we're doing is we're burying tea bags, green tea and rooibos tea bags, to look at decomposition and the effectiveness of the ocean as a carbon sink. So we left these tea bags buried in the sediment for 3 months, after which we came back and looked at the extent to which the microbes had consumed the tea leaves. Now, interestingly, the most polluted site had a very low rate of predation and a very poor carbon storage capacity as well. Coming to early 2020, I moved to the Bay Area, and shortly after that, I had my second baby. This is Adit. He's a pandemic baby. That's why he has a onesie that says, "My parents did not practice social distancing." At that time, the pandemic was in full swing, and I happened to be at the right place at the right time. So I got sucked into some incredible projects. So this brings me to the next thing that I wanted to talk about, listening to stories from wastewater. Does anybody recognize this person? This is Jon Snow, not from the Game of Thrones. He is a British physician. In August 1854, a cholera outbreak occurred in London. At that time, it was assumed that cholera was airborne, but Dr. Snow did not accept this theory and argued that it entered the body through the mouth. And he believed that sewage contaminating the river was the source. After careful investigation, including plotting cases of cholera on a map, Dr. Snow was able to identify a water pump in Broad Street as the source of the contaminated water. He had the handle of the pump removed, and cases of cholera immediately began to diminish. Disease monitoring in wastewater took off since then. And since then, it has been used to gauge several aspects of public health, like narcotics usage. The virus that you see in front of you is the polio virus. And recently, India could see the re-emergence of the polio virus in wastewater 90 days before clinical cases emerged. and this helped government officials prevent an outbreak. COVID-19 has accelerated this interest as well due to the fact that the SARS-CoV-2 genes, so this is the virus that causes COVID-19, can be detected in the feces of many infected individuals. Now, what is amazing about tracking this virus in wastewater is that we can see the virus 1 to 2 weeks before an infected individual begins to develop symptoms or approaches a hospital, or a hospital sees an increase in intensive care unit admissions. But in 2019 and early 2020, we were not very sure about the fact that we could track this virus in wastewater, or what the time frame was that the virus could be in wastewater before we start seeing symptoms in infected individuals. So in mid 2020 at Stanford University, we decided to look at populations being served by huge wastewater treatment plants from the West Coast, the East Coast, as well as Midwest United States. The question we wanted to answer was, can we correlate clinical cases to the concentration of the virus in wastewater? So we did a study across sewer sheds that covered about 9 million people. This is approximately 3% of the population of the United States. And the short answer is yes. At the same time, universities were closed, schools were closed, workplaces were closed, as it probably still is in some parts of the world where you're tuning in from, because we couldn't detect, contain, and prevent higher spread of COVID-19 infection. So we decided to undertake a study that would look at a smaller sewer network within a university campus that could perhaps serve as a blueprint for other institutions such as schools or nursing homes or workplaces, or even prisons. So this is a video that shows a little auto sampler that was installed to collect wastewater over a 24-hour period. And the results from the study were also very promising in terms of the fact that we can use wastewater even in small populations to keep track of the virus in the community. So this brings me to what I'm working on right now. The COVID-19 pandemic has magnified these existing disparities in our public health infrastructure. So going forward, I'm interested in looking at multiple pathogens in the environment to help get a snapshot of community health. And that's what I'm presently working on as a postdoctoral researcher at Columbia University. Now, fast forward to 2022, on January 3rd, we got a puppy who we fondly call Taco. And I'm extremely grateful for my wonderful family. Of course, this journey has not been problem-free. I've had several hurdles, both personal and professional, but I'm extremely grateful for everybody who supported me, for the science that continued to grow, and the fact that I'm here today sharing this with all of you. So thank you for lending me your ears, and I'm happy to take any questions.
All right. Archana, thank you so much for that great presentation. I really liked one of the first images you shared of early kind of in your education, and that image with your supervisor, David. I love pictures like that because it just shows science is fun. I don't think people get to see, the people you get to be with and spend time with. And, there's a lot of fun behind all of the work.
Of course. And what I did learn was dive cruises are actually really fun. We would spend several nights on the boat with scientists, and we would chat. And this is where some of the most interesting collaborations come about. So I've had a lot of fun with my lab mates. They're such a fun lot, and I'm really grateful that they were a part of my life.
All right. Well, let's get a little Q&A action here going. Don't be shy. I can see we have lots of viewers right now. Use that chat sidebar. Send us in a question and we'll work it in. But I want to start with, I've been to Hong Kong. And I'm a diver myself. I've been diving in lots of cool places. And I didn't think at the time too much about diving in Hong Kong. And, from what you shared with those hotels that you were using and building and leaving for a year, that there actually is a great diversity in those waters, even though there's a lot of sewage and other materials, pollution in the water. What do you attribute that to? That great biodiversity still being able to do its thing?
Well, first I thought I'll speak about a little bit about the diving, because diving in Hong Kong can be challenging. There are some good visibility days. So the photos that I shared were probably taken on one of the best days of the year. Otherwise, you can hardly see your hand when you dive. So it's a tough spot.
Yeah.
But yes, talking about life, there's plenty out there. We would often see cuttlefish or the blue-ringed octopus. So there's some of those little bigger creatures. As far as the little ones, it's an interesting thing that you brought up, because there is something in science called the intermediate disturbance hypothesis, which suggests that sites that are being disturbed intermediately tend to have a higher biodiversity than sites that are either very pristine or experiencing too many disturbances. And this is exactly what we've been seeing in Hong Kong. So these are sites which are able to tolerate the level of environmental stresses they're being put through, and they are naturally selecting these stronger strains of corals. So we often call them Godzilla corals, that future scientists would want to look at to see how cool they are.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting coral to look at too. We need to find, with water temperatures changing and stuff, those corals that can handle those extreme changes. So it is very interesting to think about and research. Very cool.
Yes.
Okay, so Kathy's got a question here. First, she said your talk is fascinating. And then, she's wondering what advice you would give to a young scientist who might want to be more involved in public health initiatives. And maybe if you don't have an engineering background, for instance.
Oh, thank you, Kathy, for that question. Well, I would say get involved in any research group that you can, in school or in a university or even in an NGO, because there are plenty of aspects of public health that one could get involved in. I did not know that I would be involved in this when I started out. And I think it's just meeting people. So it's also about networking. The fact that you're thinking about it is amazing. So I would say definitely reach out to people, and you'll definitely find like-minded individuals out there who would love to work with you and have you be involved in projects that they need help with as well.
And I think, that's such an important point that you brought up, is there really is no right way to get into science. I mean, you could start in one field, and if you're curious and open, could end up somewhere totally unexpected from where you thought you were going to be. So there's no right way, there's no wrong way to get into science. I think that curious, being open, trying new things is so important for figuring out where you might fit.
Definitely.
All right, very cool. So another question here, this is from Ramya, and they're wondering, your research in Hong Kong, how did that help you with the current research you're doing now? What maybe tools or techniques did you take from that?
Well, I think the big link is wastewater. And what better place to look at wastewater than in one of the most populated places on Earth? So I got the opportunity to work with a lot of dirt. And I think that gave me some of the best experiences I've had in looking at pathogens and looking at microbes, dealing with different types of wastewater and which are treated or not treated. So this was, I think, a very good experience for me. And I think this is significant because more than half of the world's population live in coastal cities, and we are growing. So there are going to be more and more coastal cities out there, like Hong Kong and San Francisco or Singapore or Chennai. And these places will get more and more populated and will need this kind of work to look at environmental stresses and human impacts on the health of the environment as well as public health. So I think it was, I hope I answered your question, but it's a big learning, I would say, that I got from my experience in Hong Kong.
All right. So with your current research you talked about now, looking at larger populations and then kind of that smaller one in the university and looking at how those numbers correlate, do you think that this research is leading to where we're going to be monitoring wastewater as kind of an early detection system?
I'm glad you brought that up. Yes, and I would hope so. And that's what I see our population doing in the future. Going forward, we would have a dashboard in a university or in a community where we would populate it with a list of pathogens, and people would be able to look up and say, oh, this is what we have in our wastewater at this moment, and this is what we need to watch out for. So we could take preventive action, perhaps, or contain an outbreak. So if we had something like this, we would not have probably ended up in a pandemic. So the idea is to not have another one if we have preventive tools like this.
All right. Very cool. So, wastewater, you mentioned, you didn't expect that this is kind of where you were going to head. How do you think we can get people more engaged with this issue? Because there's lots we can learn about it, about what's going on in our communities, about our health. I think you can give us an interesting picture of the health of our oceans as well. How can we get people to pay a little bit more attention to this?
I think as an ocean researcher, the first thing that I would encourage people to do is visit the ocean. Participate in beach cleanups. There are always groups out there that are working on something to do with the ocean. And that'll be the first place to start. That's how I started as well. I looked up labs and groups, anyone that would do any work on environment conservation. And I just wanted to be a part of it and get as close as I can to it. And it's just that sheer enthusiasm that'll get you to maybe make a difference, even if it's a small difference, create a little ripple, I think.
Yeah. Passion is so infectious. And when you're really passionate about what you're studying and you share it with other people, I think it really, it makes all the difference in the world. I can remember being with a scientist who studied sponges, and after spending half an hour with her and just the stories that she told about them and just that, the passion was so infectious. You couldn't help but look at sponges in a different way after that.
Yes, certainly. Yeah.
All right. Very cool. So, you've been in your career for a while in different countries working as well. I'm wondering, what challenges have you faced in your field as a woman?
Well, for starters, I did not get any maternity leave when I was pregnant. I got pregnant in my second year of my PhD, and the university did not know what that was. There was no student in the School of Biological Sciences that had a baby while doing a PhD. So I had to make changes, and I had a very supportive advisor. So we went through some discussions and we made it work. But for starters, that was a huge challenge. The second challenge that I had was in diving itself, which is not particularly looked at as a safe thing to do or a career choice in India. And now things are changing considerably. And I know several women scientists and enthusiasts who love to dive and do that for a sport as well. But when it began just 5 years ago, this was not the case. And I was discouraged. And I was also discouraged to do work in India in the first place because it's considered to be a black box, and getting permits, talking to government officials is a huge hassle. But I went ahead anyway, and I was successful in getting the grant that I got with the National Geographic Society. So I did have some issues in terms of being told what not to do. And I think probably a man may not have had to deal with that, but a woman may have had to deal with that.
All right. Well, I mean, we had Sylvia kind of start off with us, Sylvia Earle, at the beginning of the evening, and she shared, what it was like, especially her time as a Tektite aquanaut. And it's great to see the times have changed, but clear there's more work to be done, and that's what's exciting is more and more people are just ignoring, and asking questions like, why not? Why can't I do this? Why shouldn't I do this? I'm gonna do this. So that's really exciting, is that those pressures are kind of being pushed aside, and so many women all over the world are pursuing really exciting careers, and especially diving into the ocean more, and doing that kind of exploration.
Yes, of course. And it's very promising to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, first I want to share, let me just pop this up here. I think you might have shared it in your presentation already, but I just want to share those links again if anybody wants to follow along with the work that you are doing. So there's your Twitter and Instagram handles. One of the comments from someone tuning in was they love that you included those images of your family. And I think it's really cool. You had your COVID puppy. We got one as well. He's now just over a year old, so he's a lot bigger, but he's pretty cool. So I think a lot of people out there had those COVID puppies join the family. All right.
Baby and COVID puppy.
That's a busy time, no question. Well, Archana, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you too.
It's been such a great start to the weekend. So great to have your story shared with us. And I really hope that sometime we can go diving together.
Oh, for sure. Thank you so much.
All right. Awesome. Well, have a great evening, and hopefully you can tune in some more this weekend.